What is this? This little blue bar, the go-to potion. You know what I'm talking about, mana. The thing that makes spells work. I mean, it's everywhere. From the College of Winterhold to the Fallen Stars of Terraria, mana has become a fixture in games. A mythical resource that lets my hands heal and my staff go. But what is it? Seriously, what actually is mana? Who came up with it? Why and how, really, is it in every fantasy game? Well, would you believe me if I told you its origins date back thousands of years? Back to the dawn of language and human spirituality? That static little UI symbol, contains within it a history that spans cultures, continents, and civilizations. Because that little blue bar, it isn't just a made-up magic maker. It carries the weight of entire societies. Now, let's get one thing straight. Mana wasn't invented by video game devs, tabletop games, or even fantasy novelists. It has a history that spans long before that. Because the first mention of mana comes from the Austronesian languages. Yeah, I didn't know what that meant at first either, but basically all of the languages that came from this region, that includes places like the Philippines, Indonesia, Polynesia, even parts of Taiwan, all of the languages spoken here are considered to originate from Austronesian languages, which, as a language family, have existed for approximately 6,000 years. Okay, but what does that have to do with me chugging potions mid-fight like my life depends on it? What does that have to do with mana? Well, in these early languages, mana, not the potion, but the word, referred to a spiritual force. It wasn't just magic, it was authority, prestige, and presence. Chiefs had mana. Sacred objects had mana. Even the ocean itself could be said to have mana. In these cultures, mana could almost be seen like the forces in Star Wars.
It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, penetrates us, it binds the galaxy together.
In this way, mana wasn't just tied to physical things. It was a word used to describe the intangible things in life. Originally, mana had nothing to do with grabbing blue buff in League or being able to play cards in Hearthstone. It was just a word that could apply to a wide variety of things. So that leaves us with the question, how did a word for spirituality, power, and presence become associated with wizards and magic? How did mana, a term tied to ancient cultures and beliefs, make its way all across the world and become so deeply embedded in fantasy stories? Well, to answer this, we have to jump ahead, all the way to the 19th century, when an anthropologist by the name of Robert Henry Codrington, or I'm just going to call him RH for short, wrote a book on the Melanesians. Great, another word that I have no idea what it means. Well, it turns out Melanesia is this region right here. Got it? Great. Anyways, while RH was studying the Melanesians, he came across the word mana and described it.
Stay with me here.
This is important as it's the first time the word was brought into English literature. The first time anyone had actually given a description on what it was. RH described mana as a force altogether distinct from physical power, which acts in all kinds of ways for good and evil. It is the power which causes all kinds of wonderful results. Starting to sound familiar, huh? This introduction laid the groundwork for mana's foray into Western society. And soon, there'd be many others. And the connection between mana and magic would grow stronger. You see, about a decade after RH published his book, another anthropologist, Marcel Mauss, used his findings to draft an essay titled A General Theory of Magic. This is where mana as a spiritual concept meets mana as a fueler of spells. Because after Marcel's theory of magic, mana in academic circles quickly became shorthand for a sort of magic energy. In essence, started getting closer to the blue bar we know today. So, to recap all we've learned, this word started in these ancient cultures, got picked up by these 19th century scholars, and was given this meaning. But even after learning all that, I was still left with questions. Like, when did mana become mainstream? Who was the first to bring it into fantasy? And how the hell did it become a video game mechanic? And at this point in my research, I felt stuck. You see, throughout the making of this video, the hardest thing to figure out was the connection between how mana was seen in the past, how scholars saw it, its spiritual connotations, and how we see it now, as a resource, as something to be used, as a necessary fuel for casting spells and using magic. I wanted one answer, a definitive link between the academic use of mana and the gaming staple it's become today. And after thorough research, I think I found it. The connection between all of this lies in one book, aptly titled The Magic Goes Away. The Magic Goes Away is a book from 1978 by sci-fi author Larry Niven. And in just over 100 pages, he basically redefined how magic and mana work, and pretty much set the stage for how games use it today. How? Well, in the book, The Magic Goes Away, instead of magic being a mysterious, infinite force or a divine gift, Niven introduced the idea that magic instead came from a finite, invisible energy source. That source? Say it with me. Mana. In his book, every time someone cast a spell, it drained mana from the environment. When it's gone, that's it. Magic just doesn't work anymore. Kinda sounds like that little blue bar, huh? This idea that magic runs on a finite fuel, that's what really kicked off the version of mana that we're all used to now. It all started with this one book, because then, just 5 years after the book's release, this exact concept showed up in video games, with Ultima 3 Exodus, which was the first game to have a magic point system. After that, it spread quickly. You had Secrets of Mana in '93, which didn't just use mana, it put it right in the title and then became its own franchise. And a few years later, Diablo drops, and boom, mana is everywhere. Now, you'd be hard-pressed to find a game that includes spells but not mana. It's become inseparable from the entire genre of fantasy itself. And honestly, after learning its story, it kind of makes sense why. What started as a sacred force, something that gave life meaning, blessed the ocean, and held real spiritual power, slowly evolved. It passed through the hands of academics, trying to make sense of belief systems, authors experimenting with how magic could work, and eventually, game designers looking for a way to implement spellcasting into their games. It's both incredibly bizarre and honestly kind of humbling that a word I've associated with video games and spell slots my whole life, something I thought was just a catch-all term for magical energy, has such a deep cultural history behind it. It didn't just start out as the blue magic juice. It was something that had to be interpreted, reframed, reimagined again and again before it ended up as that little blue bar we know today. And the wildest part is, even though the meaning has shifted so much over the last 6,000 years, there's still a little bit of that original idea left. Mana is still this invisible force. It still represents something powerful, something beyond our control. Whether it's allowing lightning to pass through my hands, or just giving me enough energy to throw some murlocs out, it still feels like a force that I can't explain. So, next time you drink a mana potion, or watch that blue bar tick down, try to remember that you're not just managing a game mechanic. You're tapping into something way older than the Elder Scrolls or Diablo games. You're casting spells with a word that's been around for over 6,000 years. And somehow, that makes it even cooler. Hey, if you learned something new, or just think mana is a little cooler now than you did 10 minutes ago, let me know. Consider subscribing if you'd like to see more of this. I'd love to know what y'all think about this style of video, weird deep dives into the stuff behind the games we love. As always, thanks for watching. I appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Consider leaving a like or even subscribing. I'll see you next time.